Bauman, the Broken Record, comes to you once again, reminding you that Romans chapter 8 is the best chapter in the entirety of the Bible. I know that's probably heretical to say that, but Romans 8 and Romans 12, I always tell folks who are new to the faith, really even old to the faith, they should be two of the first chapters that you read. Romans 8 contains the entirety of the gospel from start to finish, and it covers every base that you need to know. Romans 8:28 is the linchpin of the entire chapter, and that's saying a lot because there are a lot of really good verses in this. But I want you to hear these words from the Apostle Paul to the church at Rome, the 8th chapter, the 28th verse. We know that God is always at work for the good of everyone who loves him. One of my favorite newspaper wordsmiths is a guy by the name of Scott Maxwell, who writes for the Orlando Sentinel. 54 months ago, he grabbed me by the throat with these words. My father was once president of the North Carolina Bar Association, he wrote. He led a high school swim team for nearly 30 years, winning 5 state championships, coaching all 3 of his kids along the way. He was chairman of the local homeless shelter, head of the Arts Council, mentor to students at Duke University School of Law. But right now, all he wants to do is look for squirrels. Squirrels make him happy. So his mom and I walk around the property of his dementia facility in Pennsylvania. We pause anytime he spies ones, all of us marveling as if we've just spotted a unicorn. There's one, he says. That's right, Jim, my mother replies, reassuring him that he did in fact see one this time. Sometimes it's just a pile of leaves. We used to correct him, but not anymore. What's the point? The frontal and temporal lobes of his brain simply don't work. You can tell him leaves aren't squirrels, that he should wait to eat until the blessing is finished, or that he shouldn't wander off in the middle of a theater performance. But none of it sticks. He just cheerfully says, okay, and then keeps doing the very thing we just agreed he shouldn't. So during a recent visit, we congratulate this man, once recognized for his brilliant mind, for spotting squirrels, real and imagined. And now, as I prepare for Christmas, he writes, I steel myself for the visit, knowing that the man I'm going to see isn't the same man who taught me to rig a fishing line, to ride a bike, to open the car door for my dates. You know, you like to think there's some kind of quaint Hallmark-style life lesson to living with dementia, like after you finally figure it out, you learn how to live with it and how to cope. But that's a lie. This disease is evil and unrelenting. It has no cure. It offers no hope. It robs its victims of everything that made them who they were. At my father's facility, the professionals do what they can to remind the residents. The hallway entrance to each room is marked by a memory box full of mementos from the residents' past. My father's box includes a note of appreciation from the Legal Aid Society and a certificate honoring his service as president of the Durham Arts Council. The hall is full of boxes of memories for those who are losing theirs. Even if the residents don't need the boxes, the visitors and the staff do. It's worth knowing that the septuagenarian crawling around on his hands and knees, searching for non-existent pieces of trash, was once a university professor or a business owner. That the woman weeping in front of a movie she's not even watching was once a loving mother and a devoted spouse. there was so much more to these people than what's apparent now. So this Christmas, Scott concludes, I'll give thanks for the blessings I have and for the father I used to have. His eyes are largely vacant now. Somewhere behind that empty gaze is the man who once crawled out onto a frozen pond, crashing through the ice to rescue my yellow lab. The man who drilled into me that pinkies always enter the water first during the backstroke. The man who stressed hard work, never making excuses, always respecting other people. The man who made me the man I am today. You know, I know a lot of people who find themselves in Scott Maxwell's shoes right now. People who live between two worlds, the land of what used to be, the land of what is, the land of diagnosis, the land of demolished expectations, the land of disappointment and doubt and despair, the land of did I treasure it while I had it. Our middle child, son Andrew, is my poet, a very erudite studier of human nature. He knows his papa well, so recently he forwarded me a clip he knew I would find meaningful. It was an interview with Shaquille O'Neal, filmed a week after Kobe Bryant died, just 3 months after the very unexpected death of Aisha, Shaq's little sister. I'm working out in the gym, Shaq said, with my youngest son and my nephew, and my oldest son comes in crying, and he just hands me his iPhone. I see the news about Kobe. I'm thinking to myself, it's got to be a hoax. Then the calls just kept pouring in. Then I turned on the TV and it just hit. It put me in I should have mode. I should have spent more time with my sister. I should have reached out more to the young fella, his term of endearment for Kobe. I should have just called and checked on him. I should have. And you know, things like that you can never get back, right? Did I treasure it while I had it? Things like that you can never get back. I thought about Shaq's words as I heard her unmistakable voice arise like a melodic muse from my car speakers this week. One of the princesses of Laurel Canyon penned the immortal words she was singing as she peered out her hotel room window in Hawaii, expecting to see flora and fauna, only to eyeball asphalt. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? They paved paradise and put up a parking lot. The big yellow taxi, Joni Mitchell sang. Today I want to talk about that, not about Joni, although her story about clawing her way back from a stroke that robbed her of her ability to talk and sing would make for a dynamite sermon. Kenny Rogers says he learned life lessons from a gambler on a train bound for nowhere. I learned many of my life lessons from a lady in a yellow taxi. I wonder, she said, what would have happened had I never gotten into his cab? She smiled wistfully as she posed the question, one of those turned up around the edges grins that's invariably worth 1,000 words. A pursed lip, iconic representation of the high highs and the low lows, the tedium of life that no one prepares you for that lies between those two poles. I sat and listened at her hospital bedside. It's a classroom you do well never to ignore. Tell me, I said, what you learned in the years that followed that cab ride. Let me put it to you the way I like to put it to others. If you had the opportunity to give a last lecture, a swan song sermon, what would you say? How would you say it? So it was that she began, slowly drawing the short breaths that become even more precious when you know that there are not many short breaths left. She looked at me very intently and simply said, "Forgive." It was a Friday evening, she said. We were at my in-laws' house for dinner. My son, 9 years old at the time, was trying to be a gentleman, or so I thought, and he pulled out a chair so I could sit down. I don't know what came over him at that moment, but as I made the move to sit down, he pulled out the chair from underneath me, and I landed with a thud as my head hit the seat cushion. My son knew that his goose was cooked, but he was a smart one, so he outsprinted his dad and his granddad to the bathroom and locked the door. They tried to pick the lock and couldn't, so they tried to convince him that nothing would happen if he just opened the door and come out. He knew better. After he'd been in there an hour, I went to the door. "It's all right. You can let me in," I said. "Let's have a talk." Against his better judgment, he opened the door. He hung his head, resigned to his fate. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, she said. He sat next to me and began to cry. I knew better than anybody. Third grade had been a tough year for him. Months of being made fun of and bullied had made him someone that he wasn't. Sometimes punishment has to be the answer. More often than not, the better teacher, she said, is grace. "It doesn't matter what all those kids think of you," I said. "I know it matters to you now, but you can't change how they feel. The only thing you can change is how you respond. But remember this," I said. "Remember you're a child of God. God doesn't make any mistakes. That's the point of the Bible's best promise. Romans 8:28. In all things, God is working to bring about good." And with that, I hugged him, walked out of the bathroom, interceded on his behalf with my husband and father-in-law, neither of whom was too happy with my lack of punishment, but who knew better than to challenge me. He deserved judgment. Instead, he was extended grace. I'd like to think it's part of what made him who he is today. That's the power of grace and graciousness. Homes don't turn into homes. Dinner tables don't turn into true communion tables. Churches do not become communities of changed lives without grace. It seems to me that in dealing with relationships, Jesus always erred on the side of grace. So should we, she said. She turned and looked towards me and said, "Let me ask you something. Who needs a dose of grace from you today? I'm betting there are some folks you've pulled out the chair from underneath, or perhaps they pulled the chair out from underneath you. Maybe you should call them. Dispense grace like a healing balm to a wounded soul. So forgive," I said. "Forgive," she replied. "It's a lot harder than you think, but it just might be the most important thing you do on a daily basis." "What's next?" I said. "Live," she replied, clearly on a roll with one-word answers. "That seems kind of vague," I replied. "I'm living now. But are you really?" Her words echoed in the hollowness of my soul. It was a fair and finite question, and in the silence that hung between us, the voice I heard in my head beside hers was the inimitable Anna Quinlan, whispering to me what she'd whispered to millions in her epic article entitled On Being a Mom. All my babies are gone now, she said. I say that not in sorrow, but really in disbelief. Everything in all the books I once pored over is finished for me now. Penelope Leach, T. Barry Brazelton, Dr. Spock, along with Goodnight Moon and Where the Wild Things Are. They are battered and well-used books, but I suspect that if you flip the pages, dust would rise like memories. What those books taught me, what the women on the playground taught me, what my well-meaning friends and family taught me, was that they couldn't really teach me very much at all. Raising children is presented first as a true-false test. Then it becomes a multiple choice until finally you realize it is an endless essay. No one really knows a thing. Every part of raising children is humbling. Mistakes were made, enshrined in the Remember When Mom Did That Hall of Fame. The outbursts, the temper tantrums, the bad language, mine, not theirs. The times I arrived late for preschool pickup, the nightmare sleepover, the horrible summer camp I sent them to, the day when the youngest came barreling out of class with a 98 on her geography test, and I said, "Which one did you get wrong?" She insisted that I include that. But the biggest mistake I made is the one that most of us make while doing this. I didn't live in the moment enough. This is particularly clear now that the moment is gone, captured only in photographs. There is one picture of the three of them sitting in the grass on a quilt in the shadow of a swing set on a summer day, ages 6 and 4 and 1. And I wish I could remember what we ate and what we talked about and how they sounded and how they looked when they slept that night. I wish I hadn't been in such a hurry to get on to the next thing, to dinner, to bath, to book, to bed. I wish I had treasured the doing a little more and the getting it done a little less. Forgive, live. Let me guess, I said. You got another one-word rhyming answer for me. You're smart, Alex, she said, but I respect that in a person. And here's the last thing I want to say. Give. The minute you make this life about what you're getting instead of what you're giving, you have lost your reason for being here. With that, she held up her left hand, absent of any jewelry. Let me tell you about what you don't see here, she said. It was a summer day 40 years ago in hot and humid Central Florida when I walked into a jewelry store in Altamont Springs, Florida. It had been a really tough stretch of months for our family. My husband, one of the hardest working men I've ever known, had been very unexpectedly laid off from his job as a salesman. He was working 3 jobs, one as a telemarketer, one as an advertising rep for the Thrifty Nickel newspaper, and one delivering Domino's pizza at night to try to make ends meet. We lost our house. We moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. I was working as hard as I could as a receptionist at the local surgery center. Money was tight. My son had just finished his freshman year in college. He was willing to stay home and work, but I knew that wasn't the answer. My husband partied out of college after 2 years. I never had the opportunity to go. Our son needed a better life. So I asked the owner of the jewelry store one question. How much money will you give me for my wedding ring? My son needs the money to go back to school. I wanted my boy to have a life filled with more opportunities than I had. So when the jeweler came back with a generous offer, I didn't hesitate to work the ring over my knuckle, place it in the hand of a man who was amazed I would do such a thing. I'd do it all again, she said. That's what love is all about. With that, the lady in the hospital bed closed her eyes and fell asleep. Class was over in room 7201 at New Hanover Regional Medical Center in Wilmington, North Carolina. I sat there for a few minutes, lost in my thoughts, really kind of evaluating my life as I pondered the words of Scott Maxwell, Shaquille O'Neal. Did I treasure time while I had it? Things like that you can never get back. I bowed my head at her bedside that night, ruminating on the words I've come to love, adore, cling to, and heed from my friend Regina Brett from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Honestly, it might be the best Mother's Day sermon you'll ever hear. On Mother's Day, see your mom for the very first time. It reads like this. One morning he left for school, not knowing he was looking at her for the last time. My brother-in-law can still see her waving goodbye at the door 28 years later. He was 13. The gold bangle bracelets he bought her that last Mother's Day were still on her dresser when they rushed him home from school. Atypical pneumonia. She was 45. Of her 4 kids, 2 of them were barely teenagers, the other 2 barely adults. They lost her young, so they treasure everything she left. Every photo, every trinket, every memory is a good one, even the bad memories. People without mothers feel like observers on Mother's Day. So do children who long for a mother's love that they never felt. Everyone celebrates something we're all supposed to have, but some still don't have or never got. What if your mother didn't tuck you in every night? What if she was a lush? What if she criticized you daily? What if she just longed for freedom from it all? Here's a question. What if none of that mattered anymore? So many people I know, she says, struggle to love their moms. Their mothers get under their skin because mothers are part of your skin. You carry her DNA, her genes, her stories, even the ones that drive you mad. My friend told me the other day she wished she could be friends with their mom. She wished she could start over and pretend her mother was someone she never met so that she could rediscover her. So maybe the best present we can give our moms and everyone else in our life is to let them out of the box we put them in. Free them from your memories of them. Find out who else they are. Instead of tuning out the stories you know by heart, ask questions. Ask like you've never heard the stories before. Ask like you will never hear them again. Get to know the person they are, not just the person they were. Give them a new start. Go in with a blank slate and no expectations. Go without your autobiography looming over theirs. My husband and his siblings don't go a day without missing their mom. When I asked my brother-in-law what he would ask his mom if he had the chance, he thought about it long and hard. What would I ask her? He said. I'd ask her not to leave. 3 days after our visit, my life lesson lady died. I am eternally grateful for those moments that we shared. When I finally heeded the wisdom of Regina Brett, instead of tuning out the stories I knew by heart, I asked questions. I humbly ask you to do the same thing with the people that you profess to love in your life. I'm so glad she was late to work on a Monday morning and got into that big yellow cab in downtown Cleveland, Ohio. The taxi driven by my dad, who knew a keeper when he saw one. They were married 18 months later, on July 11th, 1959. For pulled chairs forgiven, for wedding rings given, I give thanks to God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.